Lucy gave it a rare quality. She can perform the wildest, even the messiest physical comedy without losing her feminine appeal.
Lucille Ball passed away in 1989 with very few people there. In her final years, the actress, who had 44 million Monday night viewers, suffered from crippling loneliness. The only people in her mansions were the hired hands. No one dared to approach her kids. Her well-known Hollywood pals vanished one by one as well. Why did the most popular comic in America become a reclusive recluse? Everything she had worked for was shattered by a web of intrigue around money, treachery, and a long-buried family secret. Lucille Ball's life began with a devastating loss. Her father passed away from typhoid illness when she was just 3 years old. February 1915 was the month in question. Her mother was expecting Lucille's younger brother, and he was just 27 years old. Her father's profession with the phone business had them constantly on the move. Before falling ill in Michigan, they had resided in New York, New Jersey, and Montana. Everything came tumbling down once her father went away. Because of her depression, her mother was unable to care for her children. A relative took Lucille in, while her little brother went to live with his grandparents. Lucille would claim that tragedy and misfortune molded her formative years. She will never forget the moment a photograph tumbled from the wall just after her mother broke the news of her father's death. Little gray sparrows started pecking at the kitchen window, which Lucille then noticed. Even though it was an unusual detail, it etched itself deeply into her mind. She developed an irrational fear of birds after that, not in real life, but in any representation of them. No matter how famous she got, she still wouldn't stay in a hotel room with bird paintings or wallpaper. She never really let go of that fear. Once calm returned, tragedy struck once more. An incident occurred in the backyard when Lucille was around 12 years old. With a .22 caliber rifle and a secure location, her stepfather had prepared her for target practice. He played it safe by limiting the children's shooting to an empty area. However, an unannounced visitor, a youngster of just 8 years old, turned up. The youngster was shot as he abruptly stood up, just as another child was taking a shot. He was permanently paralyzed after it impacted his spinal cord. The family of the youngster was successful in their lawsuit. The house, furnishings, and insurance were all taken from Lucille's relatives. Guilty beyond measure, her grandpa never worked again. They had no choice but to flee the town. According to Lucille's subsequent statements, their family life was devastated by a single accident. A second storm followed. Lucille Ball was captivated by Johnny DeVita, a neighborhood troublemaker, when she was just 14 years old. Johnny was 21 years old. It was greatly disliked by her mother. She took a risk by sending her daughter Lucille to a prestigious New York City theatrical school with the few funds she had saved up, in the hopes that she would keep her daughter from going down a dark road. Things went wrong. Lucy found herself enrolled in the same class as B. Davis, but their paths ultimately diverged in every way imaginable. Lucille had a hard time, but Davis did quite well. She was told by her professors that she lacked the necessary skills without any equivocation. Lucille was allegedly informed she lacked skill, and her mother's money was returned, according to one account. Lucille subsequently confessed that the only thing she learned there was how to be afraid. However, instead of shattering her, that rejection ignited a spark. In 1928, she returned to New York City, firmly focused on her ambition and ready to show everyone that they were mistaken. Then she became ill with rheumatic fever right as everything were beginning to fall into place. The blow was severe. She had severe mobility issues and was unable to perform for 2 years. In the years that should have been her career-building ones, she stayed in bed and watched the clock tick away. The vast majority of individuals would have resigned by now. It was Lucille who missed out. Instead of giving up, she became more determined after considering all the advice from her professors. She was more determined than before when she got well. She also signed with designer Hattie Carnegie as a model around the same period. It was significant. Carnegie recommended that Lucille dye her brown hair blonde because he thought she had potential, but he insisted on one big adjustment. This didn't pause Lucille. She had a dramatic makeover, mastered the art of presenting herself in ball dresses, and absorbed all she could about grace and charisma. It was a very different form of instruction from what she had received in acting classes. Although her heart belonged on stage, she found that modeling allowed her to hone her stage presence, confidence, and ability to captivate an audience without speaking a word. Upon returning to her pursuit of acting gigs, she utilized that polish. Their glitz was lacking. Lucille had minor roles, forgettable leads, and slapstick comedy throughout the 1930s and 1940s. Despite appearing in 75 films, she was never able to reach the highest level in Hollywood. Although she made fun of the title, referring to herself as the Queen of the B-list, the fact that Hollywood dubbed her the Queen of the B's hurt. Studios insisted on casting her as either a funny sidekick or a flapper glamour girl, neither of which were good fits for her, no matter how much effort she put in. But she persisted nevertheless. Despite the lack of quality of the parts, she gained invaluable experience. She immersed herself in the industry, understood the ins and outs, and honed her craft until she could rule the screen. Not as someone else's star, but according to her own standards. In 1940, while filming Too Many Girls, Lucille Ball crossed paths with Desi Arnaz. They met when she was an established actress, and he was a young band leader breaking into the Hollywood scene. As soon as their paths crossed, a spark ignited. Desi approached her directly and inquired as to her Roomba knowledge. "I can teach you quickly, but only if you go out with me tonight," he stated after showing her a few movements. Lucille was immediately captivated. Later on, she remarked that she had never had such a rapid and intense love affair. Full of life and charisma, Desi was an attractive young man. Several of the film crew members even began wagering on the couple's relationship longevity when they immediately detected the chemistry. The pace and intensity were unbelievable. Still, Lucille couldn't resist. She confessed that he frightened her a bit. She found him irresistible because of his wild and unpredictable nature. After filming concluded, they continued their conversation over costly long-distance conversations. Just chatting with him cost Lucille over $29,000, she said. They ended up in New York City in November 1940, which was a couple of months later. Lucille was interviewing for a magazine as Desi was playing on stage. While discussing their relationship in that interview, she claimed it would never work. However, she arrived to his apartment in a rage later that day, following an argument about Desi meeting another woman. Desi unexpectedly proposed to her at the conclusion of their disagreement. Just 6 months after meeting, they hopped in a car and headed to Connecticut, where they secretly tied the knot that fateful night. A lot of people were astonished by their marriage. Hollywood did not treat interracial couples kindly in the 1940s. The studios had doubts about the compatibility of a white woman and a Cuban male. In a subsequent attempt to adapt her radio program for television, Lucille requested that Desi assume the role of her husband, but CBS rejected her. Lucille refused to budge, even though they doubted the audience would appreciate it. In retrospect, she referred to their elopement as the most daring thing I ever did. Her friends were skeptical that it would maintain its status. "They gave it 6 months," she confessed. "I let it go for 6 weeks. However, problems began shortly after the honeymoon ended. Desi was often on the road with his band. Lucille had an early morning job and he played late into the night. Little did their schedules intersect. More fundamental problems arose, such as the fact that Desi had never known a world where infidelity was socially acceptable. Even at the tender age of 12, his father had brought him to a brothel. He thought that sleeping with other women didn't indicate a lack of emotional loyalty, but Lucille found it hurtful. Coupled with his worsening drinking problem, their marriage began to show signs of strain. People had warned her about Desi's reputation among ladies around the country even before they were married. After only 4 years, in 1944, Lucille finally had enough. To end her marriage, she initiated the divorce process. Their bickering was continuous and audible. The ranting persisted throughout Lucy's youth, according to her daughter. Lucille and Desi still couldn't keep themselves apart, even after the paperwork was filed. A fiery reunion was the term used to describe their getting back together. They made it a habit to split up and try again. This wasn't an exception. However, they clung to a last hope. Perhaps they might stay united if they worked together instead of separately. Lucille Ball shocked CBS in 1950 when they sought to adapt her hit radio program, My Favorite Husband, for television. If Desi Arnaz, who plays her spouse on the program, could also play him in real life, she might consider it. The proposal was rejected by the network. Many Americans were skeptical that Desi, a Cuban guy with a heavy accent, could be accepted as the patriotic spouse of an American woman. Many U.S. states still had laws against interracial weddings, and it was uncommon to see one on television. However, Lucille remained steadfast. She and Desi embarked on a live performance to demonstrate their ability to collaborate. They went on a cross-country tour performing musical numbers and comic routines. Both the public and reviewers praised them. Their connection was obvious. Due to the tour's overwhelming success, CBS ultimately caved in. I Love Lucy came into being when they decided to star Desi. However, getting the concert produced wasn't a picnic. CBS insisted on filming it in New York, the hub of television production. But Lucille was adamant about staying in Hollywood. Television was never the same after that decision. Desi came up with the idea of employing 3 cameras simultaneously in front of a live studio audience while collaborating with producer Jess Oppenheimer. It was precarious. Finding a studio that could accommodate both the safety regulations and the crowd was a major challenge. Finally, with CBS's assistance, they located one in Hollywood and had it repaired. This revolutionary approach to filmmaking allowed performers to act out scenes non-stop, much as in a play, rather of repeatedly pausing and beginning. Additionally, it recorded the audience's genuine laughs and emotions. In addition, Desi was adamant that they forego the fuzzy tape that was standard at the time in favor of high-quality 35mm film. In retrospect, the choice was brilliant. Through their business desalu, Lucy and Desi were able to acquire ownership of the episodes at a reduced rate. Being one of the first major syndication successes, I Love Lucy was made possible by the exceptional quality of the episodes, which allowed them to be re-aired for decades. A further roadblock occurred in 1952 when Lucy became pregnant with their second child. Showing or simply mentioning pregnancy on television was deemed unacceptable during that period. Desi was informed by CBS and the show's sponsor, Philip Morris, that it could not be broadcast on TV. Lucy and Desi, though, remained unwavering. Neither did they want to duck the subject altogether or bury her beneath props. The writers devised a cunning strategy instead. They would mention her pregnancy in passing, but they would never use the word pregnant. Instead, they would use kinder words like expecting or with child. In one episode, they even used the French word enceinte to play it safe. Religious leaders were asked to go at the script. Nearly 44 million viewers watched the January 1953 episode in which Lucy gives birth, coinciding with the actual day when Lucy gave birth. According to popular belief, water use decreased nationwide throughout the show as viewers were glued to their screens, not wanting to miss a moment. From that point on, I Love Lucy had no competition. It topped the ratings for 4 of the show's 6 seasons. Only Seinfeld and The Andy Griffith Show have managed to maintain #1 ratings beyond the show's 1957 finale. In addition to Desi and Oppenheimer, Lucy took home an Emmy for Best Comedian. The show became an icon in television history and won 5 Emmys overall. New viewers continued to tune in to I Love Lucy even after the show had stopped. Reruns were broadcasted globally. It was voted the greatest television program of all time in 2012. More than 8 million people watched A Colored Christmas Show in 2013. People were still finding humor in Lucy and Desi's show almost 60 years after it first aired. The duo secretly started their own production business called Desilu. It didn't take long for it to grow into the country's largest independent television studio. The Untouchables, Andy Griffith Show, and The Dick Van Dyke Show were among the productions that they began creating after purchasing RKO Studios for $6 million. It all began when two individuals who believed in what they were creating and wanted to remain close decided to do it. Lucy and Desi's marriage, however, had already dissolved by 1960. Lucy became the leader of Desi after purchasing Desi's shares for $2.5 million, which caught everyone off guard. No woman had ever presided over a major Hollywood studio before then. The fact that she was a successful businesswoman belied the widespread skepticism she faced. However, Lucy disproved their claims. She managed large budgets, made difficult executive choices, negotiated deals, and planned for the future, all while appearing in The Lucy Show. Even though syndication wasn't on anyone's radar at the time, she went ahead and established Desi's own division to deal with reruns. After that, Lucy did something really daring in 1966. She greenlit two costly new series, Star Trek and Mission Impossible, even though nobody else thought they would be successful. The concerts were deemed too bizarre, costly, and unsafe by her staff. Meanwhile, Lucy went with her intuition. There was a period when she even thought Star Trek was about famous people on tour. She was correct in her assessment, though. There was something unique about it. They both went on to become classics. When 1967 began, Desi was doing much better. Lucy made a killing when she sold the studio for $17 million. She also left television with a reputation as a genius. Prior to that, Lucy and Desi had made an additional understated but revolutionary decision. They refused to leave California even though CBS wanted them to film the I Love Lucy live episodes in New York. In exchange for the opportunity to shoot the program on 35mm, they proposed taking a wage reduction. I Love Lucy became a financially successful program that could air for decades after its original airing, thanks to that one move, which also launched the syndication industry. It is said to have earned over $700 million in repeat income, even after more than 70 years. Lucille Ball revolutionized television, but it wasn't all she did. Furthermore, she achieved this by being fearless, believing in herself, and refusing to give up. Something nearly derailed Lucille Ball's career in September 1953. It all began when Walter Winchell, a famous radio program gossip, casually whispered a rumor. He wanted to know which redhead TV personality had a communist past. Despite his omission of her name, her identity was immediately apparent to everybody. Early the next morning, news crews waited outside Lucille and Desi's home for an interview. On the very same day, the Los Angeles Herald-Express published a massive red headline reading, "Lucille Ball named Red." The story quickly spread to other newspapers. Out of nowhere, the most popular TV show in the country's favorite comic was being accused of being a communist. It wasn't mere rumors. There was a time when being associated with communism might lead to the end of one's career and even blacklisting. The show I Love Lucy drew 44 million people. The event's backers had spent millions on it. Everything was now precarious due to Lucille Ball's 1936 communist voter registration, which she had accomplished over 20 years before. She did it to make her grandpa happy, not because she believed in it. A strong believer in workers' rights, he had brought her up. She was making an effort to maintain harmony among the family. A federal investigator met with Lucille, and she detailed everything. She was honest, despite her fear. According to her, she had never attended a communist gathering. It was mentioned that Lucille's house had hosted a conference in the 1930s, but she denied any knowledge of the event. This was the only time her name came up in reference. Additionally, her brother was on her side. They both said it had nothing to do with their political beliefs and was done only to appease their grandfather. Lucille was terrified of losing everything, but Desi Arnaz was everything but. He did something. Sitting down with the reporters, he spilled the beans on what had transpired after inviting them into their house. According to him, Lucille had never been a communist, but that wasn't the end of it. Even more audacious was his move on the first episode of the new season's filming. Desi addressed the assembled reporters from the stage amid mounting tension in the crowd. According to him, he had called and someone was on the other end. Afterwards, he raised the phone to the overhead speaker. Yes, it was J. Hoover made it clear. Lucille Ball was not a communist. The audience went wild in their approval of Hoover. A buzzing energy filled the space. All eyes were on Desi now that she had cleansed her name. However, he had one further point to convey. "Now I want you to meet my favorite redhead," he added, his voice quivering as he glanced at the audience. The joke hit, the tension dissipated, and Lucille, her eyes watering, took center stage. "The only thing red about her is her hair, and even that's not legitimate." Throngs of people cheered. Lucille Ball was awarded Woman of the Year shortly thereafter. There was an invitation for her and Desi to have supper at the White House. Truth, bravery, and humor helped them turn around the controversy, which had almost ruined her. There were no intentions for Lucille Ball to be married again after her arduous 1960 divorce from Desi Arnaz. At the age of 49, she was exhausted and devastated. However, that changed on a fateful night in the Big Apple. She met nightclub comedian Gary Morton on a blind date, arranged by a mutual acquaintance. The date happened at a pizza shop while Lucille was playing on Broadway. It may not be flashy, but it got the job done. Despite being 13 years Lucille's junior, Gary said he had never watched I Love Lucy as he was usually at work on Monday evenings when it aired. That made Lucille happy since it showed he wasn't enamored by her stardom. They began dating, and after 11 months of dating, they tied the knot. Although there were only around 40 people in attendance at the ceremony, a massive audience waited outside the church to chant, "Good luck, Lucy," as the couple exited. Lucille couldn't stop gushing about her happiness in her subsequent letters. She gushed about how lovely, humorous, charming, and loving Gary was. Finding him had been a stroke of luck for her. They were married for over 28 years until her death. Wildcat, Lucille's sole Broadway production, had recently opened when they met. Everything that could have made it a smashing success instead went horribly wrong. The opening night was postponed due to a snowfall when the trucks transporting the sets were stopped on the highway. She was under a lot of strain since her firm, Desi Productions, had put a lot of money into the program. People were expecting her to play TV's Lucy Ricardo, but she ended up doing a completely different part. To make her performance more like her TV role, Lucille began to incorporate jokes and mannerisms. Nothing changed. The strain on her health was a direct result of the negative reviews. The program had to go dark on occasion because she was unwell. The next April night, she passed out while performing. They attempted to put the event on hold so she could get better, but the union representing the musicians said they needed to be paid nevertheless. After only 171 performances, the show ceased permanently due to the hefty expenditures. That was a low point in her professional life. Even at home, things didn't improve. After meeting actress Patty Duke in 1970, Lucille's adolescent son Desi Arnaz Jr. began seeing her. Lucille was completely against Patty being 23 years old. Funny thing is, she was 6 years older than Desi Sr. when they tied the knot, and now she was irate over her son's connection. She issued severe ultimatums, threatening to force him out of the house and cut off all communication with the will unless he ended it. The preservation of the family's reputation seemed to be Desi Jr.'s mother's primary concern. Patty said she had no ill will, but she was nonetheless quite wounded. She didn't think she deserved to be viewed like a danger because she had good intentions. She was already dealing with many relationships, one of which involved actor John Astin, and her mental health was a major concern. Relationship status updates with Desi Jr. persisted, though. The controversy began when Patty became pregnant soon after her marriage to Michael Tell. After just 13 days of marriage, speculation began that Desi Jr. was indeed the biological father. The thought frightened Lucille. This was the furthest thing from her after years of diligently cultivating a respectable public persona. Patty subsequently confessed that she had allowed others to assume Desi was the father, despite her knowledge that he was not. No, she didn't exaggerate or misrepresent anything. She gave birth to her son Sean in 1971, and the press was just blown away. The hospital felt the need to conceal his identity in order to deter reporters from approaching him. Lucille did not accompany Desi Sr. and Lucy when they visited the infant. Genetic testing on Sean's biological father, Marital, revealed his paternity years later. However, Sean's life continued with Desi Jr. Their friendship remained strong through it all. Regardless, harm had been done. It all turned out just as Lucille had feared. The headlines, the gossip, the drama. Most people thought Lucille Ball's career would take a nosedive once I Love Lucy ended in 1957. Still, Lucy wasn't finished. Absolutely not. The Lucy Show, her return program in 1962, shocked everyone by becoming even more successful than her last effort. She was back on top by 1968, but she shocked everyone by walking away. After selling her firm Desilu, she had little interest in continuing to work on it. She decided to start again and created Here's Lucy with a new production business. Here it got personal. Lucy and Desi Jr., her actual children, were cast to play her on-screen children. She insisted on their involvement before agreeing to do it. By discussing topics like civil rights, rock music, and shifting social mores, the show aimed to reach a younger audience. Lucy was making an effort to adapt to a world that was always evolving. But viewership has begun to decline by 1973. After 23 years of television dominance, Lucy was considering a comeback to the big screen, while her daughter Lucy departed for a Broadway tour. She took a step back at last. However, behind the scenes, Lucy had already begun to encounter fissures. A long time ago, her best friend and co-star Vivian Vance quit The Lucy Show. The lengthy journey from her East Coast home to the studio in Los Angeles had worn Vivian out, had exhausted her. More funding and opportunities to express her creativity were denied to her. Lucy was devastated when she left. She sobbed quietly, expressing her inability to do the concert without her. Following Vivian's departure, the show's format underwent a complete overhaul. Time went along. Next, in 1985, at the age of 74, Lucy pulled off an unexpected turn. She portrayed a lady experiencing homelessness in a television drama titled Stone Pillow. Aside from comedy, she wanted to show that she could do other things. Viewers tuned in, and the show's ratings were solid. With renewed vigor, she gave Life with Lucy a go. But by then, everyone else had moved on. Critics gave the show low marks, and after only 8 episodes, it was canceled. She had never before experienced the mid-season cancellation of a show. Lucy was devastated by the setback. She reduced the frequency of her public appearances. Standing next to Bob Hope and accepting a standing ovation, she made her last television appearance at the 1989 Academy Awards. Lucille Ball passed away a month later in the same year. However, a significant and understated event occurred in 1986. Desi Arnaz, her ex-husband and former co-star, was terminally ill with cancer. Their love had remained strong even after their divorce, which had occurred many years ago. Lucy paid him frequent visits. Lucy, who was born to them, said that their relationship remained strong until the very end. Lucy contacted Desi on November 30, 1986, the day that would have marked their 46th wedding anniversary. He stutter-spoken. Over and over, Lucy proclaimed her love for him while holding the phone to his ear. Nodding, Desi continued, "I love you too, honey." With his remaining strength, he bid her farewell and wished her luck with her show. 2 days later, Lucy was by his side as Desi passed away. Lucy was taken to the hospital in a hurry due to chest pain on April 18, 1989, 3 years after the incident. Her heart's main artery was torn, according to the doctors. After a lengthy and potentially dangerous operation, she appeared to have a fighting chance for a while. Acute back pain struck 8 days after she received thousands of cards from fans across the world. Her organs failed her. For almost an hour, doctors battled for her life, but they were ultimately unsuccessful. April 26, 1989 was the date of Lucille Ball's death. She was 77 years old. More tragic than the loss of a superstar was the loss of a woman who battled to be seen, loved, and remembered until the end of her life.